Now we're going to go up to the skies and check out the air cargo and see what's going on there. Eric, good morning, my friend. How are you?
Great to see you, Mike. Doing great.
Excellent, 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 my friend. So, were you able to get the data together and talk about what's going on in March there versus the earlier February numbers there in air cargo? Is things still as strong as they were before, or what's the trend?
Yeah. So. Yesterday, we had some interesting data come out about the air cargo market, and it would, seemed obvious, but what we're seeing is that the war in Ukraine, the sanctions on Russia, the closed Russian airspace, the COVID lockdowns in China, are starting to have a material impact on air cargo volumes. So let's start with the International Air Transport Association first. Mm-hmm. They kind of lag, and so they came out with numbers for February. So that was pretty much before the invasion had started of Ukraine. So not much impact in their numbers, and it was a pretty good picture for February. The air cargo volume by their measurement was up about 3%. From last year and 12% from 2019, which is the benchmark I like to use. It's, takes out all those weirdness of 2020 and 2021. Right. And so that looked good. Capacity still a little, was still down about 5.5%. But, they basically said that, some boost in China manufacturing out of Chinese New Year, and then more capacity coming in the market from passenger airlines as COVID, Omicron, relaxed and restrictions relaxed. That helped bring some capacity in, and those were kind of the drivers behind it. But they also warned about, some of the macroeconomic concerns like inflation, being at record highs, potentially, dampening demand. And then they noted that export orders were down in March and also in January. And new export orders are kind of a leading indicator of what might be carried by aircraft. So those are down and a little bit worrisome. But then we got information from Clive Data Services, which is now owned by Xeneta, and they have more real-time information for March, and it's pretty stark. The volumes for air cargo were down about 6.5% versus 2019. Capacity slipped and is now down about 14% from 2019. So kind of where we were, early last year. And so, you've seen the effect of closing off Russian airspace and the loss of some of these Russian and Ukrainian cargo players from the market really starting to have an impact. In fact, it may have moderated some, but they thought it maybe 15 to 20% of capacity down on that Northeast Europe to Asia trade lane because of the rerouting around Russia. And one other thing, Mike, the really interesting fact that they pointed out is that there's more shipments going to the spot market. The spot market rates are up, and so and the share of volume that's going to the spot market is up about 20 points to about 60% now of everything that's flying is spot market as carriers kind of push some of their customers to that. And they gave us an example of, Japan to Europe being about 50% higher on spot rate. And just in general, rates are up maybe 25% in the last month.
So, Eric, it's something I've almost never heard is spot rates in air cargo, right? And it's interesting that you bring that up. But how is that playing? So rates were really, really high. Had they been coming down significantly, and so where are they heading now? Back to pandemic levels? I mean, when you talk about the volume being down 6%, yet capacity down in the mid-teens, that indicates a lot of pressure on rates right now, yeah?
For sure. I mean, we've had that pressure on rates, all the time since the pandemic, but, there's been some softening at times. And then we saw some softening earlier this year, especially leading up to and around the Chinese New Year and parts of February. And then I think latter part of February, it picked up a little bit as the factories kicked back in China. But, then, then the Ukraine war broke out. So it was up late last year. Then December, January softened a bit, and all that softening is still happening at elevated levels relative to pre-pandemic. So, but now we're starting to see them go up. Rates are roughly 2.5 times where they were in 2019, but they could start going up even more. And of course, you have to remind you that we're talking global averages. These are different on, heavy trade lanes like Hong Kong and China to the U.S. and Europe, and so they're more there.
Yeah, I would imagine on some of the lanes, there's hints at possible excess capacity at times. I would imagine that's going to be a thing in the future. Let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the big things, as you know, on FreightWaves.com and what we've been talking about, and many others now as well, is the excess capacity that is looming in the surface transportation in the United States, right? The impending bloodbath in trucking that is possible there with all these new carriers and capacity that's out there as volumes wane. Is this being a concern or starting to be a thought in some people's mind in air cargo? I see that there's, you're talking about the Silkway has reached all the way to Cincinnati, right? Let's talk about that, some of those expansions there.
Sure, no, that's a great connection to what might be happening in trucking. I don't think we're there yet in air cargo as far as getting to overcapacity. I think we talked last week about all this activity in doing converting old passenger planes to freighters because of all the demand and this rush to do these, leasing companies and cargo operators converting these planes to get more equipment, and especially in the narrow body jets like the 737-800. And there were some analysts raised some concern, by mid-decade, could we be topping out or at overcapacity then, when all those planes hit the market. But right now, we're definitely, not there. We're in a capacity deficit, especially, with these wide body freighters that are needed on international routes. There's just not enough international passenger is, traffic is still way down. So those wide body planes that can carry freight in the belly are just not there in enough quantity. So the capacity situation is still extremely tight. And so, relative to that, you made this good point we wrote yesterday about Silkway West Airlines, a freighter operator that has about a dozen 747 freighters. They're flying for Crane Worldwide Logistics under a big charter program for the rest of this year. 82 flights inbound from Bangkok to Cincinnati, and then to Luxembourg, and then they're going to add more flights from Hong Kong starting in May. And, that points out two trends we've seen for the last year or so, which is you can't get reliable transportation or capacity, so you have to rent the whole entire plane. It's plane load versus less than plane load in kind of trucking speak. And so freight forwarders are doing that all the time. And going to more of these secondary markets rather than Chicago, LA, New York, Atlanta, because there's congestion and, trucking prices and, landing fees are so high, and just the delays getting your cargo retrieved. So going to places like, Cincinnati is one way to get around that. And Crane, just did that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at truckload and you look at LTL, when things are changing, you see LTL volumes or less than truckload volumes go up as the truckload starts to come down, right? Or the economy starts to soften. The freight economy, anyway, starts to soften. Is that a similar situation that you see in air cargo as well, that it becomes less than plane load?
That's I can say from experience, I think that's a great assumption. And if the market softens, there'll be less need for some of these freighters, full freighters, to secure them entirely for yourself. But I think a lot of people think they're going to need the full freighters for a good while, because there's just so much uncertainty, and with the passenger flights especially.
Yeah, it seems that way, and there's a lot more expansion there. Go ahead.
Yeah, and especially in Asia, is such a big market, and that's where there's hardly any passenger flying because they've locked down so much in China, and there's Omicron is still going there. So, having freighters is really key in that market.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a lot more to get to. We're going to have to catch up with that a little bit more. Hey, viewers, check out his work on American Shipper and on FreightWaves.com. Lots of great information. You'll understand what's going on in the air cargo market, which is obviously connected to all the other modes as well. Thank you so much, Eric. Have a great weekend, my friend. Right now, I'm going to toss it over to Stone Cold Nick Austin and the weather.